Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Jarrod Best-Mitchell. I'm going to talk more about Jarrod in just a moment. And also want to let you know, this is the first of a couple of podcast episodes that we've got coming up, specifically talking about LinkedIn and social selling. Now, you might be saying, like, oh my God, another bunch of beast content on LinkedIn and social selling and blah, 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 blah. I've heard this 100 times before. Yeah, maybe you have. But the question is, are you really implementing a LinkedIn strategy that's working for you, for your company, for your startup? And so I've gone through and handpicked a couple of different people that I know to be experts on LinkedIn that are helping companies and individuals just like you to leverage LinkedIn as a platform. And the reason this is so important is that all of us have seen how different LinkedIn is as a platform over these last couple of years. And more importantly, how it continues to shift and it continues to change month to month, quarter to quarter. And so the more that you stay on top of the right LinkedIn strategies to implement, the better it's going to help you with filling your funnel, generating conversations, and getting the conversations that you want to have with your target prospects. So that's exactly why I'm having this series of podcasts coming up. So Jarrod happens to be the first guest in the area of LinkedIn and social selling. And the reason I wanted to have Jarrod on the program is because he is recognized as one of the top content creators and social sellers on LinkedIn throughout the Caribbean. He has had over 700,000 organic views on his content already this year. And he's used this B2B platform, and he's constantly, through his business, educating entrepreneurs and companies and early stage companies how to use LinkedIn and leverage that specifically for sales, not for marketing, not for customer success, not for branding, specifically using LinkedIn for sales. In the past, as a run-up to his work running his business today and his training, he has worked at some of the biggest companies in the world as a sales professional. He's worked at Nokia, he's worked at Microsoft, he's worked at Samsung. And so he's brought all of that experience and boiled it down into a very easy, comprehensive way for sellers just like you to use LinkedIn as a way to fill the sales funnel. In addition to all the work that he does with his business and training professionals on how to use LinkedIn, he is also the co-founder of a group called Sales as a Profession. And so Jarrod is based in Trinidad and Tobago, not Tobago, as he corrected me in the podcast episode coming up. And one of the things that he found is that the entire Caribbean region is really underserved, and it's gone unnoticed as an opportunity for companies and startups based in the United States, based in Europe, for sales talent. English is a native language down there. There's very close proximity in terms of time zones and geography. And as much as oftentimes we think about outsourcing our sales talent to Latin America or other parts of the world, the Caribbean has really gone unnoticed. And there's a huge opportunity there for startups just like you. So we spent some time at the end of our conversation after we talked through tactics and strategies on LinkedIn, specifically talking about his work in the entire area. He talked about 5 different countries where he has specific personal individual ties to different economic development and investment forums. And he can really be a person that can help you at least investigate places like Jamaica, places like Trinidad, places like Barbados as a place to source your sales talent. So in addition to the tactics and strategies, we spent some time helping you think through where you can recruit some of the best talent in the world to help you grow your startup. On the LinkedIn side of things, specifically, one of the things we talked about is what you can be doing as a founder, as a entrepreneur, as a early stage company salesperson. What could you be doing on LinkedIn? I think a lot of times it's very overwhelming. I know myself, when I log into LinkedIn, there's this feed of content and all these people are getting comments and likes and shares, and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I dive into this river of content that's flowing in and flowing by? And one of the most important statistics that Jarrod shared with me in this episode that you want to pay attention to is that only 3 to 5% of all of the people on LinkedIn are posting content on LinkedIn. Chances are you and your company may be one of those 97% or 95% that are not doing that, at least on a consistent basis. And that is the opportunity. So Jarrod talked through a specific strategy that you can use as an early stage company. It's very simple, very easy to implement, and will get you some traction in the coming 3 to 6 months if you do it the way that he describes it. So make sure you listen to that specific playbook that he talks about in terms of how to leverage LinkedIn. And then specifically, we talked about what kind of content and where to go find that content. So you're not sitting there with a blank cursor a blank sheet on your screen and a cursor blinking and you're trying to invent content. Good news is you already have all the content. You're sitting on the content today. And in my conversation, Jarrod talks about how you can unlock that content, that mountain of content you're sitting on, as a way to post on LinkedIn regularly to attract the kind of customers and prospects that you want to attract into your business. And then, of course, we wrapped up, as I mentioned, with his perspective on the Caribbean region as a place to go and build your sales teams. So I really enjoyed the conversation with Jarrod. I'm so glad I've gotten to know him over the last couple of months. Specifically, we met through LinkedIn. He's a wonderful person. I think you're going to enjoy his personality. You're going to love his expertise, and make sure that you go and check him out. The best place, of course, to find him is on LinkedIn. So if you just search for Jarrod, Jarrod, and last name is Best-Mitchell, you'll find him on LinkedIn, and definitely connect with him. And when you do connect with him, best news is you will get a personal video response from him. I know, because he did it to me. We talked about that at the end of the podcast too. So, okay, that's the prep. That's the concepts that we're going to be covering today. Again, this is one of a couple of episodes we've got coming up around LinkedIn and social selling from different experts just like him. I think if you listen to these episodes, you can treat it as a guide. You can treat it as an implementation plan for how you and your team can be leveraging LinkedIn through the rest of this year and into the future as a way to fill your funnel and reach the prospects that you want to reach. So that's it for now. Let's head over to my conversation with Jarrod. Jarrod, welcome to the program. It's so good to have you here.
Hey, Scott, what's up? Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. You've for the people that are listening and not watching, you're in yellow shirt, yellow background, and that's your brand. That's your brand color. You were showing me a couple things just before we jumped on the show that are also yellow around.
Yes, as I told persons, like for some people, yellow is a brand color. For me, I'm obsessed with the color yellow. So in addition to my keyboard, the wall, even my bedroom is yellow. Then I also have like about 30 something plus pairs of yellow sneakers, 10 yellow clothes. Trust me, we would lose the conversation today if you ask me about yellow, because I'm that obsessed with it. But it's not a brand for me. It's something I've loved since 5 years old. And I'm fortunate now because I work for myself. My boss says I have to wear yellow every day.
You work for yourself. Your boss says you have to wear yellow. I love that. Well, I have a similar affinity to purple. So I don't wear a purple shirt every day, but I have a purple background and lots of purple pens.
It's a beautiful purple though. Oh my, yeah, that's a nice rich purple. Yeah.
Thank you. I painted it myself. So
me too. This is my handiwork.
There you go. Well, listen, Jarrod, I'm really happy to have you on the show. You and I met actually about the very topic, the main topic we're going to talk about, which is LinkedIn. And I don't know if you remember how we met, but I had done a LinkedIn post and a mutual connection tagged you in the post. And I was like, who is this guy? So I clicked in your profile and checked you out. And I'm like, oh, this guy looks fun. So then I sent you a DM. And then from there, we had a couple chats on LinkedIn and then a conversation. And here you are on the show. So I wanted to ask you, under that context, like when people ask you, what do you do? What is your superpower? How do you describe what you do every day right now?
That's a nice question. So I will put it to you this way. With regards to LinkedIn, what I do on a daily basis, specifically for the Caribbean, is opening up organizations and individuals' minds to the mass opportunity that they're missing out with regards to this platform. Because sadly, in the Caribbean, we're always a couple of years behind, and I've been on this platform for over a decade, and I understand the power of it. It's just that companies now understand it's just to show them what to do the right thing. So I would call myself a LinkedIn guide. I'll be your ways with regards to the platform to give you the insights necessary to succeed. Where my passion for all of this comes from is that I've been in sales my entire life. I've done no other job but sales. I like to stress to people who are listening, it's not marketing, because I always get people who think it's marketing and no, it's 100% sales, not customer success, not customer experience, just sales. So what my skill set is in sales is that if I am passionate and I love and understand your product, your competitor is in trouble because I will get that market share. That's how passionate I am. So one of my friends put it in the best way possible. Hopefully the callers don't take offense to this. He called me a cult leader, and it's with regards to one of the roles that I had, because he said nobody was talking about, and this is when I worked at Nokia, he said nobody was talking about Nokia until you started. And then all of a sudden, it's the latest craze. And I said, yeah, because when I believe in it, I make sure everybody does the same.
Love that. Well, I mean, I've heard that phrase of, build a cult-like following as a way to think about leading the crusade or leading your cause or leading your community, your tribe. And I've also heard it from a person named Dean Jackson, who's got a website
Okay. Let me take notes
called
of
I
that.
Love Marketing. And he
Mhm.
talks about this concept as well. But I want to rewind a little bit to help you describe, and for people listening to understand, like, how did you come into this world of LinkedIn? Because you mentioned Nokia, and your background includes work with some of the largest software and hardware companies in the world. Like you mentioned Nokia, you've also worked with Microsoft, you've also been
Mhm.
at Samsung. And so, the 10 years ago in LinkedIn, if we go back 10 years, like LinkedIn is still pretty nascent, right? It was kind of out there. I was, been on LinkedIn for about that long, maybe a little bit longer. But I remember it was kind of this thing where you're just like, okay, I'll connect with people. For
Yeah.
me, it was just about like building almost like having a database. I wasn't really sure what to do with it. And it wasn't until maybe 5, 6 years ago that I started to really understand what I could be doing with it. So if you would maybe describe that sort of evolution for you, that sounds like it started at Nokia, where you started using LinkedIn and then started developing and evolve the strategies and systems that you're implementing every day for yourself and for your clients.
Yeah. So the pattern is actually really similar to yours, Scott. But it started before Nokia. I logged onto the website because, again, I heard people talking about it. I think originally it was because, if I'm not mistaken, I joined LinkedIn the same time I joined Twitter, or maybe early,
Oh,
because I
interesting.
remember at the same time I heard it, I heard them talking about it on CNBC. And they
Mm,
were talking about new and emerging platforms. And I remember Twitter was one of the hot topics as being new. And then they mentioned LinkedIn. And I never
yeah.
heard about LinkedIn. So I joined it. And immediately I understood it was for people who are looking for jobs. But just as you said, I started to realize I could probably search and find a couple of people here. So what I started doing was, as I met people in my job, as I prospected, I immediately started looking for people on LinkedIn. And I still do it to this day. And from there, again, I just started to test and tweak things with the platform. And then I paid attention to certain things. So one thing I'll give kudos to in terms of where I'm knowledge-wise and why I got passionate about the platform, I'll always give kudos to Daniel Disney. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with him. He's the king of LinkedIn, in my opinion. He's the one who was one of the people 5, 6 years ago, plus who was posting, getting massive engagement, educating people on the platform. And I just became obsessed following everything he was learning and then testing it myself for my market. And then once it worked, I then put my perspective on it. So eventually over time, because no one else was doing it in the Caribbean, in Trinidad itself, a lot of people identified me. And every time I saw them, they said, "Hey, Jarrod, I always see your stuff on LinkedIn." And I'm like, that is good. As like the second question I asked was, is it valuable to you? Because when I saw what they were doing, I said, great, let me share my experiences. Let me share what I know about sales and see what happens. And that's how everything kind of steamrolled into what it is today.
And who was the person that you mentioned? Daniel?
Yeah,
What was
Daniel Disney. He's based in the
Oh,
UK.
okay.
Yes, his official color is red, and we have the same matching yellow wall, by the way. It's very cool. But
Okay.
I would always credit to how I got passionate about LinkedIn. Definitely accredited to him because one of my other good friends was Sean for like 2, 3 years. She would get annoyed with me because every day I would tell her something new that I found out about the platform or something I heard Daniel Disney say. And I was legitimately obsessed. And that goes to where my passion is in sales because, like, when I get obsessed, I dive deep into what it is that I'm obsessed about. And I start just sharing the excitement about it to others. So, as I said, LinkedIn for me eventually evolved. And as the platform evolved, I started to take notice of it and use those things to my advantage because here's the description I always give persons, and it's valid to this day. LinkedIn is, think about real estate. Think about the most valuable real estate in your area, but there are no houses. But what a lot of people are doing is just land grabbing, but they're not building on the house. They're just putting around a basic chain link fence.
Hmm.
So people who are coming to the neighborhood aren't really understanding the value. But for people like me, for yourself, for content creators who are putting out content and we are actually building houses on this valuable property. So people are coming to us. So if people want to understand what LinkedIn is that you're literally sitting on valuable land. The only way it gets more valuable is for you to develop it. And it will eventually reach a point where what you develop won't be worth as much as how we are developing our skills and knowledge on it and sharing because We were the first to do it. And we know the stats like I think it's 3 to 5% of people, if so much worldwide, actually produce content on LinkedIn. So as long as that number stays, it works perfect for me, especially in the Caribbean where the ratios are even less. So even to this day, people always say, I always see a content on LinkedIn. And I'm like, because no one else puts out content. I was like, it's that simple of a formula. I share what I know, I put the information out there, and every single person can do the same thing. You are on valuable land.
This is a really good segue into some of the more specific questions I want to ask for you, because while a lot of your business focus is around people in Trinidad, Tobago, or people in the Caribbean in general who are not really using LinkedIn or might not even be on LinkedIn yet, that 3 to 5% number you just mentioned, like all of the millions of people, hundreds of millions of people that are on LinkedIn, only 3 to 5% are actually producing content. So the way I view it is like, and I know this from working with startup clients and early stage founders and their early sales teams. Many of them, they say, oh yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. And I'm like, well, what does that mean?
Exactly it.
Like, what does that mean when you say you're on LinkedIn? Well, like I read some posts, or sometimes I'll put some content out. But it seems like there's a couple different camps that people fall into. One is they feel like, well, it's just like using LinkedIn, it's really hard to cut through the noise. So like, why add yet another article? Because it can get really lost, just like on Twitter, right? It's just this constant feed. The other is like, well, I'm not really sure what to do or how to do it. So in the analogy you used, it's like, okay, I have this land, like what kind of house do I build? And should it be a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom? Should it be a single family home, or should it be a couple of apartments? Like, how do I think about developing it? And then there's the actual execution. So you could decide, okay, I have this land and I want to build this house, but I don't even know how to do it. So that number that you said, the 3 to 5%, just tells me that even though there are people that have been on LinkedIn for 10 years plus, they're not using it. And so whether they're in the Caribbean or they're here in the United States in the middle of California. So when you talk to people like that, or they kind of throw out those almost like objections as to why they're not more active on LinkedIn, how do you help them reframe their thinking, or how do you help them get started with engaging with that piece of land that they have so they can start building and developing that real estate?
You hit the nail on the head. They feel overwhelmed because they're saying, Jarrod, we're on every single social media platform. And I said, number one, in many cases, even for your audience, you are a B2B product. Why are you spending more focus on Instagram and Facebook and not on the biggest B2B platform in the world that has been proven time and time again to generate pipeline? That's the first thing. So if you feel overwhelmed, it's honestly a case of where I think you have to quit one of the social media platforms that isn't giving you that ROI and spend some time on LinkedIn with a strategy that you could set some small goals towards. And if it gets you towards those goals, then you can see the potential, which I know there is. Here's the other thing that I stress to everyone. I ask them, if you aren't putting out content, and I do this in real time, because 2 things happen. I said, who are your competitors? Who are you competing against? I was like, let's pull up their page. And in a lot of cases, those persons aren't putting out content. And I mean on the individual profiles, because we'll talk about company pages in a sectors. Unless you're running ads, that's the only way LinkedIn pays attention to your company page. The focus should be the individuals in your organization. Sarah Brazier from, if I said the name correctly, she's from Gong, and she's like one of their rock stars on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Right? Yeah. So here's the thing. If I go on LinkedIn and your company isn't producing content and your competitors aren't producing content, who's influencing your buyer when we know buyers spend more than 50% of their time searching online for information before they reach out to you? So who is influencing them? And if nobody's talking to my customer, to the potential customers that I'm interested in, and you're the first to do it, then you get seen as the expert. So that alone should be your first thing to do, because that should appeal to every company, because that's a first to market opportunity. Because you're already in a market that I wouldn't say saturated, but you have competitors. But if there's a field where your ideal client, your buyer is on and is looking for content but can't necessarily find relevant stuff to it, you aren't producing it and a competitor isn't producing it, that should be encouragement to say, listen, we're fighting up trying to get the attention on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, and we're not getting traction. Let's put a pause or automate that strategy and create something organic here on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And even if it's not the other social platforms, it's, well, you're not getting their attention using email, right? Because a lot of companies are, okay, we're going to send outbound emails and try to generate meetings in that way. That doesn't always work. And so there's this alternative way of communicating with your target customers. And that's
correct.
That's LinkedIn. I do have a question about...
Let me give you, I just want to mention two things, just because I know this is important. It's Tobago, not Tobago, because Tobagonians will be very upset if you say Tobago to them.
Sorry.
That's important. And then here's a little quick sales tip for everyone, which I have found, I've tested it and it works. If you cannot find your ideal client active on LinkedIn, in most cases, they're active on Twitter. So if you can't, if you're not seeing them active on their profile, grab the name, you would find them on Twitter, guaranteed.
Okay. That's interesting. So in the competitive sense, right? So you mentioned, let's use the case of a early stage tech startup. So there's probably a lot of competitors that may or may not be direct competitors, but they're always competing for the mind share of that target prospect. So those competitors, other startups may not be posting, as you mentioned. So there's the opportunity there to start developing that real estate. What about situations where a tech startup is in some ways is competing against a larger company, like you sold at Microsoft and Nokia and Samsung? So some startups are actually building solutions that do compete with these legacy platforms. And so those companies tend to have lots of content. If you go to Samsung's company page or their marketing team, they're doing lots of content on LinkedIn. So how do you help somebody think through posting content, not just against competitors that are in your same level, but against competitors that might already be very active on the platform?
That is something, and let's draw reference to Malcolm Gladwell's book, David versus Goliath. You have the opportunity to move faster than your competitor. So you can actually react way faster than a massive organization like Microsoft towards your target customer. And just last week, I was talking to one of the telecoms companies here in Trinidad about this. You would be able to react way faster to issue a solution or a trigger event in your ideal client's profile faster than a large organization as Microsoft.
What would be an example of when you say like a trigger event?
So let's just say, how to put it, boy? Let's put it in this wide sense. I want to put it in a correct perspective for your audience. Let's just say in Texas last year when it had the snow outage, and the grid shut down, and all of a sudden, and this is also goes to the point of when clients say they don't have budget, but everybody had money to find a generator. Generators were selling off the rack. If you were an individual reseller, you would have been able to do faster door-to-door sales versus people having to leave their house to go Walmart or to go to Home Depot, because they won't have the strategy to go to everybody's individual house, even if it is that you had to order because people were snowed in, their batteries died, they weren't able to leave their house. So if you went home door to door as an individual smaller company, you would have been able to sell more of your product faster, even if the price may have been slightly higher, versus Home Depot, who now have to go quickly to think of a plan to put it out there in the market, to run ads, etc., put stuff out on social. You'll be able to execute a lot faster. So I hope that kind of gives the example, even though it's a non-SaaS example, but it kind of just shows what you can actually do.
All right, folks, are off and running my conversation with Jarrod. So excited to have him on the show. Just very, very easy to talk to and has tons of expertise as you're quickly finding out. So as much as Jarrod works with people specifically on LinkedIn and helping them with social selling, our company here at Sales Qualia, as you probably know, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you, our entire focus is helping early stage B2B tech startups, companies selling to the enterprise. We help them ramp up and scale up their sales process. One of the things that we've found over and over and over in the decade plus that I've been doing this is that many times founders, early stage company founders, are really great at getting early customers, getting early revenue, proving some product problem fit, getting that, kind of getting that sales engine started. But where they struggle is going from founder led or founder everything selling to a place where they get to founder-less selling, where they've got a team, they've got a structure, they've got a playbook, they've got a repeatable, scalable sales process. That's exactly what we do. And that's all we've ever done here at Sales Qualia for the last 10 years. And so if you're an early stage B2B tech founder, typically some of our best clients tend to be in the seed stage or A-round stage, just a little bit before, maybe just a little bit after. And you're finding that you're a little bit too involved in your sales process as a founder. You're still doing the demos. You're still overcoming objections. Maybe you're still doing some of the prospecting. and the lead qualification calls. Maybe you're still doing some of the implementation. If you're finding yourself way too involved in sales and other things are missing from your business because you don't have time to fundraise, you don't have time to build product, you don't have time to go hire great talent, or you're finding that when you go do those other things, sales is suffering, it's a perfect opportunity for us to help you out. So if you want to learn more about what we do, and if you most of all just want to have a quick chat about how we might be able to help you out, then just shoot me an email. You can send me an email at the email address Scott, SCOTT, at salesqualia, sales, QUALIA.com. That's Scott at salesqualia.com. Just type the word private into the subject line. Let me know that you want to have a quick chat based on hearing this opportunity for us to have a call here on the podcast. What we'll do is we'll dive into your business. I'll do a quick diagnostic, give you a couple quick ideas on how you can improve your sales process. And then if it seems like there's a fit for us to help you out on the longer run, then we can have another conversation or two from there. But most of all, take advantage of this situation session, as I call it. Let's get a look at your situation. Let me give you some quick advice, give you some quick ideas that you can implement right away. And then we can always take things from there. So that's it for now. Let's head back to my conversation with Jarrod. Well, conceptually, it makes a lot of sense because as you were describing that as well, one of the, what I call luxuries of being a smaller early stage startup is that you don't have to sell the same revenue level or the same amount of product as a very large company. So using the Home Depot example, when they look at, okay, we need to order these generators, get them in stock, they're thinking in hundreds or thousands of generators for them to make the kind of profit they want to make. Versus as a small company, if you go to door and you load up 50 generators in a truck and you sell out of those 50, for you on a relative scale, those 50 units are probably worth way more than 100 or 200 or 500 units at Home Depot. Correct. So being more nimble as you're describing and more responsive with that trigger event allows you to take advantage at the level that means the most for you. And maybe the revenue for those 50 generators is what you need to get to the next phase. Or that gives you the cash you need to hire someone, or the funding, the proof that of the funding you want to get.
Yeah, correct. And that's what I think you should always relish in the fact of being a small SaaS company versus the larger ones. Of course, if you set up all your trigger responses through Feedly, through all the different mechanisms that you have, you could immediately respond to something in hours versus where a large organization would take 24 to 72 hours sometimes just to react. And that could simply be a phone call. And I think what the smaller SaaS companies aren't realizing is that you could literally reach out through LinkedIn. So your approach is more proactive, where in Microsoft's and all the other big companies' case, it will be reactive. And it might even be a case of where the customer is contacting them to get help with the problem. Whereas my small company would actually reach out to the decision makers through our sequence, through our cadence and strategies on LinkedIn, et cetera, to get a face-to-face meeting with them.
Yeah, and I like that approach as well. And I think a good analogy of that is, like, you've worked at big companies and I have too, that sort of customers contacting you and kind of waiting for a response. Like, I've been at conferences, for example, where we've spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on events and booths and all those things. And then you beep the badges. And what does the marketing team do? They scoop up all the leads and then they send them to the sales op team, who sorts them out, who then gives them to the managers, who then distributes them to the reps. And it's like 4 weeks before the leads from the booth actually get to the reps. And meanwhile, the customer is like there and interested. Whereas as a small company, if you're in that booth and you're beeping badges, it's like, hey, let's set up a meeting for next Tuesday. You can do that, whereas the big company can't. So I think using that flexibility to your advantage, to your point, if you see a company that's in your target market that's complaining about something, like you said, pick up the phone, send them a LinkedIn direct message, and that quick outreach can be all the difference. And again, you don't have to have a lot of these because you're a small company. You get 5 or 6 or 7 new leads out of that strategy. All of a sudden now you're filling your pipeline in a way that makes sense for you.
I love it and I'll bring one other analogy to give people an example. I have a cherry tree in my yard. Every 3 months, I get cherries, maybe 6 months. And it dawned on me the other day. I was picking cherries and I had a bowl full of cherries. I was maxed out. I can't eat any more than what's in this bowl. But on the tree and on the ground are probably 10 or 15 times the amount. I possibly cannot eat all of that. I cannot grab those opportunities. As a small business, as a small SaaS company, this bowl is 10 times what I already projected, and this is what I could handle right now.
Yeah.
For Microsoft, they need every single one in the ground and every single one in the tree.
And then they want to plant more trees as well.
Yeah. And if they don't get it, they are losing profit. You are already profitable with a handful of cherries. You have a bowl. So that's how you need to look at it.
And so
stages.
Yeah. So somebody who, okay, we've sort of started to get them thinking, okay, I need to take more action on LinkedIn. I need to develop my land. I need to start building a house. What are, like, for example, the top 3 things that somebody listening can say, okay, I've been on LinkedIn for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. I'm not really that active. I'm not doing any posting. But even now I feel, okay, you've sort of convinced me I should be doing something. I should have a strategy and I should be thinking about getting and developing that land. It still feels like, for some people, like, well, where do I start? So if you were to, when you advise people, like, hey, just do these 3 things consistently for the next 6 months, and you're going to get some good leverage from the platform. What are some of those easy things that somebody can just keep doing over and over that's going to help them develop that land?
If I'm a SaaS company, I would first find, depending on the size of the organization, 3 to 5 people max who are willing to dedicate their time on social, to commit to say, listen, I will post once every other day or once a day. You can get that commitment from me. That's the first thing, because I don't think you should do it organization-wide. Some people just aren't generally cut out for it. Great. Let's put the ones who have a genuine interest, ensure it matches their KPIs, they're compensated, etc. But once they say, yes, I'm committed, hands in, that's the first step. The second thing is that it's easy to come up with ideas in terms of what you post, but the thing that you should focus on firstly is, how are you solving problems for your customers? What are the problems that your customers and clients are facing and you want to solve? Because you can talk about that all day. And the thing that you have to realize, which I think a lot of people forget, is I have this thing where I show my clients, we do not give people a loaf of bread. Stop. Your content is a loaf of bread. Stop giving an entire loaf. You need to give them breadcrumbs, not even a slice of bread. You need to give them pinches of bread, because 1, that's their attention span. 2, if you start giving out more, then that doesn't give them the value. They feel overstuffed and overwhelmed. Yet little nuggets allow you to influence and keep top of mind over a longer period, and you get to nurture them along the stage. Because something I always tell people is that the content I put out is what helps a prospect become a customer. So it guides them along that journey. So if you think of your content in that aspect of, this is the problem we solve, work our way backwards, reverse engineer to say, how does the customer get to that point? And we start creating content on those things. Specifically, if we are targeting a particular state, industry, whatever it might be, and we go really granular on that, that is going to get their attention. But then it allows you to build a database now, which is your third step. So first step, commitment. Second step, content. And then third step is where you have a database now. So what it means is that when you're talking to customers and they ask you about certain things, you have a reference where you don't need to repeat. You just grab the video off of LinkedIn or wherever your database is and directly customer to it. And if you constantly do that, then you're actually going to have a lot more success on it. And again, I agree with you. I love the timeline of 6 months, because people need to have patience with the platform. If you are consistent on it, if you are always connecting, and one last strategy, your connection strategy needs to be a specific type, as in only connect with people who in the companies you want to do business with, or people who you know. If not, and they don't match what you're trying to do right now, you should not be connecting with them.
Yeah. And I've had people suggest go so far as to go back on a regular basis and pair away people that aren't. So for me, for example, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. And so since being on LinkedIn, I've worked at several different companies prior to having this company. And so I have connection requests, or I have connections that are people like real estate agents and mortgage brokers, because in a previous company, that was one of our target markets. But for now, like, I don't sell to those people. They don't even get value out of my posts. So one of the things we've done is we actually downloaded all of our contacts, and then we went through and figured out who we should just take out and unconnect from them. Somebody on my team just go through and take out people that are no longer the types of people that we would target now. So that way it guarantees that anybody that sees my stuff is going to be a potential either referral partner or somebody that we want to do business with.
And some persons may hate that, but here's the thing why it makes total sense, Scott. Remember how the LinkedIn algorithm works? It shows it to your audience who is active. If the only active audience isn't people who are your ideal clients, then you're not going to engage with it. If they don't engage with it, LinkedIn doesn't show the content to anyone else. Whereas if your content is suited for your clients who you're trying to help in the SaaS industry, then they like the content because it speaks to their problems. And when they like it, it shares to more people who fit those similar ICPs. So you have to make sure that that connection base or the connections match what your current objectives are, especially as you add new persons on, because it really does make a significant impact in terms of the engagement on your content.
Yeah. And so I guess last question on the content, you talked about obviously focusing on problems that your customers are having and giving them the breadcrumbs. Could you go down even one more level and give maybe an example of like, what's an example of a topic or for a post that's problem oriented, that's not too overwhelming? Because I suspect that, again, like for a lot of people, they're sitting on mountains of content right now, and that they're having conversations with prospects, they have customers, they're answering objections all the time, they're doing the discovery calls. Like, there's information in what they're doing every day, but they don't really know how to take it out and think about putting it into LinkedIn. So can you think of an example or two of like what would be a breadcrumb that somebody
I would
could
tell
think
you
of?
the scenario that creates it. So the scenario is
Let's
more
do that.
important to understand. If you've ever met with a client in the discovery phase and the client asked you a question and you thought in your mind, how the heck you don't know that? Like, who doesn't know that? That's content. Because if they don't know, most likely many others are asking the same question.
I love
That's
that.
how I look at content. Like, that's the first scenario. However, what I teach clients to look at is after you have a meeting with a client, write down the 3 to 5 questions that stood out and answer those questions in content. Right now, many of the clients I'm working with are in the insurance industry. That's how they're creating repeatable content. What they're doing is creating content based on the core focus of what their products are. When they get the Q&A, they're answering those questions as content now. So all of their content is coming from their ideal clients. It is one of the best strategies I think anyone can utilize. And it's something I highly recommend that you do. You should focus on the scenario.
Yeah. I love that. And the breadcrumb is just like not making a post with 3 or 5 questions answered. It's like one question answered. That's one post. The next post is question 2. The next post is question 3. And that's where you can stretch out the content and deliver it in breadcrumbs.
Because they don't have the attention span. Like, I could eat the breadcrumb and I could digest that. But if I have to eat the breadcrumb, if I have to eat a slice of bread with salami and mayonnaise and everything, then I get too confused thinking all these different things I'm taking at one time. So answer one question in your content. Don't spread it around too much. You always confuse your audience when you do that.
I guess, what are your feelings about recycling posts? So let's say I go through 6 months.
Yes.
And, there's a question I answered back in July and now it's December.
If it's relevant, recycle.
And how do you specifically recycle? Do you take the old post and repost it? Do you just copy and paste it as a new post?
If there's any additional context to add to it because of how the market changes, and in SaaS, a lot of things change quickly, but the core message is the same, you may have to reshoot it, but there's a guide. And then also too, it shows that you are correct because you can say, listen, look what we were saying 6 months ago. And then we're bringing it back to the market. But remember, the reason why you repurpose content is it's just like running ads. The more you see it, eventually after a while, it sticks in the customer's head. Like, there's a joke I make, there's an ad that runs in Trinidad that is probably 20 years old. And I make the joke to my clients saying, if they can run this ad for the last 20 years, you can repurpose that from 6 months ago.
That's right.
So trust me, and always think about it this way. Because you're building your audience on LinkedIn, as you get more people added to your network, they didn't see that content from 6 months ago. You have to repurpose it and introduce it to them.
Yeah, and I love that. Yeah. It also reduces the overwhelm of feeling like, I got to come up with new content again and again and again. If you've got this base of content, you just reuse it every 3 to 6 months. I mean, obviously, we want to add more stuff, but let's say you're in a pinch, you're traveling, you're at a conference, it's a busy week with fundraising or something else. Like, cool. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm just going to go on a binge and recycle stuff because it gets me active. There's value to it.
It's relevant to the audience.
Burden. Yeah, and it reduces the burden of like sitting and writing a new post.
What I would also do too as well, if you have the analytic tools like Shield, etc., you can actually go back and see what were your most popular posts
What is Shield?
Shield is the LinkedIn analytics tool. If you look at shieldapp.ai, I think that's the website's name.
Okay.
That gives you can actually see all of your content's performance. You can even break it down, for example, and see what. Let me make sure and get you the right website. I don't want to give you right shieldapp.ai.
Okay.
And so they have it broken down. You can actually see how all your posts have performed year on year. You can see how text-based posts perform versus your video content. You can see the
I love
engagement
this.
rates.
I've never heard of this before. This is wicked.
Scott, you're going to listen. I got introduced to this 2 years ago, and I renew my subscription annually without even batting an eye. It's the best thing ever. So now, if I want to repurpose my content, I go back and pull my best performing content, and then I just schedule that, and I can schedule it and repost it if I want to. If time is of the essence. Wow. So that way, you're always putting out your best stuff. And think about it. If you look at like what TV is, don't you watch the best episodes of the show? Like if there's a great episode of Law and Order, I'm sitting down and I'm looking at that. So if your content perform well for you and it's relevant to your audience now, repurpose it. And that could probably generate brand new leads that you've never had before.
Oh man, this is huge. Well, look, man, I know we could probably go for hours with these kinds of tactical tips. So I want to be respectful of your time. And I also want to spend a couple minutes on another topic, which you've referred to a couple of times, which is your work in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for correcting me on that. I'm so embarrassed now. It's like I'm so American in that I screw these things up. And even here in the States, like on the news and everybody, they pronounce it wrong. So you've been active, obviously, in that community, not just to help people on LinkedIn, but more active broadly with the work that you're doing in the sales as a profession group that you've been running. So I know you recently had a conference, for example, and as you and I were talking in preparation for this episode, we talked about how there's so much opportunity for companies based in the US or Europe or other places using the Caribbean and that geographic area as a source for talent. So I'd love for you to give some perspective about the work that you're doing with sales as a profession and what the opportunities are, and just sort of share your knowledge about that region.
Oh, sure. So just to give you an example, sales as a profession is my business partner and I's idea. It started where we were doing, both of us are obsessed about sales, but what is great about it is that we look at it from different sides of the mountain, but it goes to the same destination. And we just saw a need of where, yes, a lot of the trainers were foreign, they're great, but there's no Caribbean perspective talking about sales. So we used to do it from our experience. And that started as Instagram lives, and then it turned into networking events, and that eventually turned into our sales conference, which in June 15th, we did it for our 4th year in a row with about 120 attendees, 60 in person, 60 virtual. But it all just comes from the perspective of highlighting top local sales professionals in the Caribbean and what they're doing to excel the craft so that others could see what can actually be done. Because a lot of the thinking here, when you talk to companies, they're shocked at what can be done in sales now, to be honest. They're shocked when you tell them about new techniques, strategies, etc., because they have, I wouldn't even say they're looking at the spin selling manual. They're looking at some older text of reference that they have not changed over the years. And despite that fact, there are a lot of sales professionals who have immense talent. And I think companies worldwide could actually snap this up, because I could tell you there are quite a few persons I know right now in the IT sector who've gone on to work in Google, Amazon, etc., those sort of things. But I think the international companies could really tap into some of the best sales talent in the Caribbean and I would highlight 5 countries in particular, Trinidad being number 1, Jamaica, Barbados, St. Lucia, and Guyana. Those are your 5 main countries you should focus on. But
why those 5?
Economically wise, in terms of what's happening for all of them, they're the ones who are more better positioned than the other islands. Guyana is going through probably one of the biggest oil booms worldwide, as in the amount of oil they will be producing in the next 3 to 5 years is insane amounts, and their population is less than 1 million people. So the impact on their population is significant. It's almost like a case of Dubai. That's what's going to be happening with them. It's that potential. Trinidad, we used to be oil dominant, but now as our oil reserves are probably depleting in the next 20 years, we need to focus on other things. But Trinidad has always been referenced as the Americas of the Caribbean because our infrastructure, the people, the education levels are way higher than most Caribbean islands. Jamaica has an advantage because their government pushes a lot of the innovation versus where in Trinidad, the private sector pushes it, which makes it a lot difficult because the government doesn't understand. In Jamaica, the government is the bandwagon. So they have a massive fintech industry in Jamaica. I'm trying to remember the description of the services, but they have massive call centers there for companies in the States as well. So companies in America, like worldwide, you don't need to tap into what happens in the Caribbean because you literally get some of the best talent. And I think what will make you smile, the price is really good. It's going to be way more affordable than if you take it in your own country. That's why I mentioned to you the client that I spoke to who's going to start doing their stuff on LinkedIn. They're a manufacturing company with LED lights and they're targeting North America because they know they're cheaper than if they buy it, if the customer buys it in North America or either buys it from China. They're faster, they're cheaper, and it's the same quality. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that countries in the Caribbean miss out. And if you're listening to this, I know there's an investment forum coming up in November. And it's things you should check out so you can actually see the amount of opportunity manpower-wise there is in the Caribbean for you to take advantage of for your organization. And all you need to give is an internet line. And in most of those Caribbean countries I mentioned, the internet is fantastic. The infrastructure and stuff for those things are great. And that's all you need for your team to operate and be great.
And why does it get overlooked? I mean, because I see lots of posts where it says, look, we're hiring remote Latin America, as a target market a lot of times, even Central America. Like we have a team in Belize, for example, and I know other people have teams in places like Guatemala or Costa Rica. So those are like known, and yet geographically they're right next to, the Caribbean. So why does this get overlooked as a region? Why don't people pay attention to it?
So even though the Caribbean is lower, the Latin America is slightly lower, and then they come with the benefit of bilingual. So in most of those jobs, if you notice, it is where you have to be fluent in Spanish and English. And I think also too, because of the numbers, that's what makes the cost per employee a lot lower than if you were to focus in the Caribbean. But I still don't think that should be a reason why you negate it, because I think on par with what the standard of living and everything is, you would still be able to access and get some really good talent.
Got it.
But I think I think it's from a sheer numbers perspective, as in, because for example, LinkedIn has a massive office out in Brazil. So even though what their vacancies go after is for Brazil, and it goes for everything from the lower half of Central America to South America, they still predominantly focus in roles and tell you have to be able to speak Spanish. Like that is the primary factor in terms of what you do. But I think over time, hopefully changes and hopefully they get wind and realize that they're missing out on a good pool of resources.
Well, yeah. And for many tech startups, especially, they're not selling into international markets in most cases, right? They're just trying to get, their first 100 customers and their first couple million in revenue. So for a company that's based in Silicon Valley or Chicago or New York, I mean, and the time zones are good. I mean, you're in Trinidad right now, and it's only a 3-hour difference from the West Coast of the US.
Yep.
So, and being English as a native language works great as well. So
we can get a jump start on those European markets for all of those SaaS companies.
That's true, because they could call into Europe and the time zones align a little bit better there as well. Yeah. So you mentioned this investment forum coming up. Is your organization a place where people could reach out and if they wanted to ask some more questions? Or
yeah. So again, I know you'll have my contact information on the podcast details, but if you want to reach out and find out more in terms of the investment opportunities in Trinidad, I actually know the entire team across in the Trinidad and Tobago International Finance Center. They deal a lot with the investments, and I know some of the heads in the other investment organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. So if it's something that you're seriously looking at, especially with the manpower of it, I can definitely help, because one of my more viral posts earlier this year on LinkedIn was helping a lot of persons find jobs because the market is rich for it. And I was so happy that it had over 300 responses and people actually got jobs because recruiters posted jobs, companies posted jobs, people posted the types of jobs they were looking for. And they will get an opportunity. So if you are in the market looking for things right now, yes, I think you'll be able to get some really amazing local talent that will, we all know the statistics. Immigrants work harder when they work for organizations. So you're going to get somebody that will give you 150% in your organization. And you know that what that's going to translate to into your numbers.
Yeah. And if I have to do an on-site visit to my team overseas, I mean, why not go to Trinidad or Jamaica or
no, well, not upon the other countries. So not to say anything against them, but the other countries, we cannot beat them on beaches. But they cannot beat us on parties. We are party central. So, and we always say this, if you're coming to Trinidad, come for Carnival 2023, since it's the first year after COVID, it's going to be the biggest carnival ever. And I'll leave with this last story. When my brother worked in the US Embassy, one of their children came down, and I think he was in the NFL, right? And he was confident because he planned to party. We have like a week of parties before the main celebrations. And my boy said, hey, I'm going to every single party. Mind you, there are about sometimes 3 parties a day with drinking involved. And my brother warned him, slow down. You might be getting ahead of yourself. No, I'm an NFL player. I'm fit. I could build for this. Okay. In day 3, they had to carry him to the hospital.
Oh boy.
So we know how to know, like today's a Tuesday. In other islands, it'll be dead. Trinidad, you could find somewhere to, as we call it, not hang out, lime. We call it limeman. You could find somewhere to lime full party in full swing. So they have beautiful beaches, but if you're looking for a party, Trinidad is the place to be. So it's a great company retreat. This is where you could do a conference.
There you go. There you go. So you just sold me on. I might need to check out that investment forum in November. I'm not much of a party guy, but certainly would love to check out that part of the world. I've spent a little bit of time in places like Jamaica and Puerto Rico and a few others, but I've never been down to Trinidad. So
you would enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah, cool. Well, listen, Jarrod, it's been a real pleasure to have you here on the show, sharing your expertise, not just, of course, around LinkedIn, but also the way that you've really positioned yourself as somebody as an expert for the Caribbean region. So really appreciate you coming on and spending part of your day with us. For people that do want to reach out, what's the best way for them, just to get in touch if they just want to have a quick chat or learn more about how you might be able to help them on LinkedIn or, look for opportunities to hire in the Caribbean? Where should they go to get in touch?
Of course, LinkedIn will be the best place to reach out to me. I think you would have seen it where I like to respond to all my connections via video as fast as I can. Yes. It's something that I take massive pride in because I'm at about 5,300 personalized videos on LinkedIn so far. So you could reach out to me there. That's where I respond the fastest. And if you're honestly looking at getting some really good talent, send me a message because after this, I'm actually doing a post for 2 companies who are actually looking for about 5 roles to get filled in Trinidad. Okay. So I'm posting that out to my network so that they can apply and I could connect you with, as I say, some of those persons who can make it happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, you sent me that after I sent you the connection request, after the mutual connection tagged you, and then I sent you a connection request, you accepted, and you sent me back a video. And at first I saw it was a video and I thought, oh, it's probably just like a canned video that he just copies and pastes for everybody. And then I played it and it was like, hello, Scott, how are you? And I was like, whoa. And knowing how many connection requests we probably get, I know that's an investment that you're making. And it made a big impact on me because immediately I was like, wow, that was really cool that you took the time to shoot that video. And I know it was a short video, but still, it didn't really probably take you that much time because you do it so repeatedly. But it made a big difference as opposed to somebody who just accepts the connection request and never messages back, or they just message back, hey, good to connect. So getting that
love
personal
video.
touch from you is really fantastic.
I love video. That's a pillar for me. I think every Saturday I do my best to sit down and take an hour just to send videos out to all the connections I had for the week. But I think it makes a big difference because, and this goes out for the sales roles as well. If you're in sales, like send a video to your prospect versus thank you message in a connection request. And I know for SDRs and AEs, it's a numbers game, but your numbers don't mean anything if you don't send video. I'm telling you, video. That is what's going to make you stand out in the crowd. And you can even make it simple. Like when I did a webinar with Daniel Disney, get a whiteboard and hold it up saying, hi, Scott. So he sees his name and it'll make them more inclined to click. But I would never do text to say hi to somebody when I introduce. And I think about it as we get back in the workplace, in the as things are open up now, Scott, if I meet you at a networking event, I'm not going to text you and say hi. I tell you hi to your face. So in the digital world for me, I don't want to text. I want to message you and say hi. And it's so an important part of me. For my birthday or even special occasions, I don't respond to any text messages. Like you have to either call me on video or send me a personal video or a voice note. I don't respond to text messages. I don't care what it is. Even some of my close clients know this because a client the other day messaged me and then she said, "Oh, I realized I should have sent you a video." And I'm like, "Yep, we could talk." So it's an important part. It creates that personal touch.
Love that. Well, listen, Jarrod, thank you again. Love having you on the show. As soon as we get this published, we'll share with you so you can share with your massive tribe on LinkedIn. And anybody that wants to reach out, do that on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And maybe I'll see you down in November.
If you come, you're going to get world-class treatment. I'll carry around to everywhere myself.
Oh, man. We got this on recording, so.
You have my word on that. I will show you everywhere.
I believe you. All right, Jarrod. Listen, man, have a good rest of the day. Thanks for hopping on. Appreciate your expertise.
You too.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show. Again, really appreciate you as a listener. And so one of the things you could do to help us out, if you wouldn't mind, is number one, leave a review on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to the show on. If it's Apple Podcast, if it's Spotify or somewhere else, we pay attention to those reviews. We want to hear how we're doing. And more importantly, that also helps other people just like you find this podcast. It helps the search engines in these podcast platforms to recommend our podcast to other people. More people listen, the more it gets recommended, and the more people we can reach with this content. So please do leave us a review. Number two, tell a friend or 10. Like, hey, if you're part of a startup group, you have other founders that are friends or colleagues. Maybe you're at a workspace. Maybe you've got other people that have similar investors, and you just happen to know these other founders. Shoot them a note and say, hey, I've been listening to this show. I listened to this episode. It's really good. You should subscribe to the show, the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That would be a huge help. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do that so that you can be notified of every new episode we've got coming up in the coming weeks, months, and years ahead. So that's it for now. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. Listen for those next episodes coming up around LinkedIn and social selling, as well as other guest experts that we're going to have coming in to help you ramp up and scale up your sales process. That's it for now. This is Scott Sambucci signing off.